With the 2026 competitive Pokemon TCG season now fully underway, with league challenges, league cups, and regional events coming up, I'll be ranking the best decks for September 2026 based on the results of the World Championships, which just commenced a few weeks ago. At number 10, we have Marnie's Grimmsnarl Frostlass. With Gardevoir winning the North American International Championships and now winning the World Championships in the Masters division, you might think that a deck like Marnie's Grimmsnarl would be a little higher up than 10th place, being that it's a deck made up of a huge Dark type Pokemon that can take care of Gardevoir EX pretty well. Unfortunately, this deck's major downsides are its poor Gholdengo matchup, and Gholdengo was the most popular deck in both Day 1 and Day 2 of the World Championships, and also its lack of draw power on the board. Of course, it does have a very thick line of supporters along with Secret Box and Pokegear, but unlike a deck where they have an Zoroark to trade, or Gholdengo to use coin bonus, or Dracloak to recon directive, after you use one of those supporters, you don't really have any more draw power or any more dig that turn, which is a problem for Marnie's Grimmsnarl. Of course, the positives about the deck is that Frostlass's Freezing Shroud spreads a lot of damage, and that you can allocate your manual attachments to Monkey Dory for its Adrenabrains, since Marnie's Grimmsnarl's Punk Up ability accelerates energy to itself, so you don't have to worry about attaching there. Marnie's Grimmsnarl's top finish was top 64 in the Masters division of the World Championships, and that's what we'll be going off of for all of today's decks. So this is still a relevant deck in the meta, coming in here at number 10 according to the point accumulation at Worlds. We'll have to see if maybe Marnie's Grimmsnarls can pick it up in the upcoming major events before we shift into the Mega Evolution format in October. Next at number 9, we have N's Zoroark, which actually finished with 2 players in the top 8 of the Masters division at Worlds. This first one we'll look at is from Matus, and it's using some interesting cards that we don't always see in a Zoroark deck, like the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX, which is being included without any water energy to use Torrential Pump. It's there strictly for the Retreat Lock from Sob. And then also the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX, which is there to wall out Pokemon like Gholdengo and Charizard with the Cornerstone Stance ability, and 1 Fighting Energy has been included in the list to be able to attack with Demolish. The core of the deck, however, is N's Zoroark EX with the trade ability. You can discard a card to draw 2 cards. This is an incredibly powerful ability that we've seen in the past as well. And then what makes N's Zoroark EX pretty hard to use is that it only has 1 attack, being Night Joker, and it has to copy an N's Pokemon's attack. And so the only one that this deck is going to have, the only N's Pokemon that we're going to be copying is N's Reshiram, which has the Virtuous Flame attack, which can swing for vanilla 170. But then Powerful Rage can really rack up damage pretty quickly if the opponent hits into your N's Zoroark and doesn't KO it. If a Dragapult hits you for Phantom Dive for 200, that Powerful Rage is now swinging back for 400. So it's a very scary attack to keep in mind how much damage you're hitting the N's Zoroark for. So a pretty meticulous deck to play. A lot of 1 copies of cards in the deck, and with those interesting techs of Wellspring Mask and Cornerstone Mask, this is definitely a deck to play if you're looking to have an edge and some counterplay into the more popular meta decks. But we also do have the other N's Zoroark. This is from Marco C. Fuentes, actually the brother of last year's world champion. Marco also made top 8 here with Zoroark, and playing some very different cards compared to Matus. So they're playing the 2-1 line of Toad Scroll with Slime Mold Colony. Slime Mold Colony is going to counter Gholdengo, going to stop them from using Superior Energy Retrieval and Night Stretcher. So any other deck with Night Stretcher, this can also hurt. And then they're also playing Petron EX, which can switch your dark Pokemon into the active and poison it. And that goes along with binding Mochi, which says the attacks used by the poison Pokemon it's attached to does 40 more damage. And you also have Janine's Secret Art in here as a means of energy acceleration, but that will also poison your active, so that also works with the binding Mochi. Next, at number 8, we have Dragapult Charizard. Dragapult Charizard has definitely had wavering hype between pre-NAIC and post-Worlds Championships. I think it was seen to be maybe a better deck back near the North American International Championships than it had been revered to be at the World Championships. It does combine two very, very strong Stage 2 Pokemon. Of course, the line of Dragapult that comes along with the draw engine of Dracloak and the damage spread of Dragapult. And then also the high HP, high damage output, and high efficiency of Charizard EX. So combining these two evolution lines is probably never going to be bad. It's just how good is it, or how optimal is it in a field of very, very optimized decks. Of course, the Charizard being in there will give you some help against Gardevoir, which is typically a harder matchup for Dragapult variants. However, it seems like this wasn't piloted by maybe the strongest players at the event, and it probably just ended up not being the strongest deck at the event. The Dragapult variants with Dusknoir tended to do better, and the Charizard variants with Pidgeot tended to do better. So maybe it's time to stop combining these two kind of stars together and just stick to pairing them with backup partners that allow either Dragapult or Charizard to really shine in their own deck. Next, we have Flareon Noctowl, another archetype that stopped at top 64 here at the World Championships. The Flareon Eevees deck, they have changed which Eevees they're playing. For a long time, Sylveon EX was staple. You would not see an Eevees deck without Sylveon EX. But this one here, which was the highest placing one in the Masters division at Worlds, it did not play Sylveon. It just played Flareon EX and Leafeon EX. Of course, that Flareon EX is going to be really good at knocking out things that are weak to fire, like Gholdengo and Teal Mask Ogerpon. And, Gholdengo is very popular. Raging Bolt with Teal Mask Ogerpon's pretty popular, too. So that type advantage does some work for the deck, for sure. And then Leafeon EX hits weakness against Charizard and against Zoroark and against Marnie's Grimmsnarl. So the weakness of these two Pokemon together actually do hit a good bit of the meta. And then you have Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX, which can be used to try to take out two Pokemon at once. That could be really good against Dragapult and against Gardevoir, trying to take out two Dreepy or two Ralts at the same time. And then you've also got the Terapagos EX that can be used for its second attack to wall out a Raging Bolt deck. Also can just be good as a colorless attacker that's Terra, that can use Briar or just be on the board to activate your Noctowls. So this is a pretty meticulous deck to play. There's a lot of cards going on and a lot of different lines that you could take at all times. That's the nature of a toolbox deck. It has a lot going on, so it can suffer from consistency, can also suffer from misplays. With all of those options available, but still looks to be a pretty strong deck into our standard format metagame. Next, we have Straight Dragapult, and we'll be looking at a very control-oriented version of Straight Dragapult. This was piloted by Kido Arai to a top 32, also piloted by Haru Nishikawa, and I believe Tord Reklev also played this exact 60 as well. So Straight Dragapult, what are you usually going to have in here? Your line of Dragapult EX, you got your Monkey Dories, the Badoo, the Latias, and the Blood Moon. The Hawlucha, of course, for some extra damage. The Maractus to Retreat Lock. Now that Maractus is going to be very important. The Retreat Lock is very good. You'll notice that there's 6 gust effects in here. And the Pheasantipede for some draw. But the cards in here that are different, we've got that Ethan's Sudowoodo, which has an additional Retreat Lock option in addition to the Maractus. Maybe you want to hit something that's resistant to fighting and Retreat Lock them infinitely, the same way that the Maractus can do that to something resistant to grass, like a Genesect or a Gholdengo. And then you also have the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon in here. That's going to be good for hopefully walling out some Gholdengos. Maybe not needing to wall out Charizards like they would use it for in the Zoroark deck, since Dragapult typically has an okay time into Charizard already. But that Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon is there if you need to wall out anything that has abilities. Next at number 5, we have Charizard Pidgeot, and this actually got 4th and 5th place at the Masters Division in the World Championships. And the lists are slightly different, so we will look at both. We'll look at the other one quickly after this, but they both did play the line of 2 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, and 1 Dusknoir. Those Cursed Blast abilities just work so well with Charizard EX, because you're forcing your opponent to take a prize and you're putting damage on their board, and then Burning Darkness will then do more damage. It can also help you activate Counter Catcher. It can help make your Iono stronger. This is just a very powerful deck that once you have that Pidgeot EX set up for the quick search every turn, it feels like there's almost nothing you can't do. Now, this list piloted by Junia, this one did play Maximum Belt as the A spec of choice. And then if we look at the 5th place, which was piloted by Oyvind, Oyvind played the Secret Box actually as the ace spec, but you'll see a lot of other things here are quite similar, still playing the Dusknoir line in there. So yeah, Charizard Pidgeot saw pretty good success at the World Championships. I'd say 4th and 5th place, due to Charizard Pidgeot having a good matchup into Gholdengo, also having a somewhat favored matchup into Gardevoir. The Gardevoir matchup definitely can change based on them playing Devo, what kind of build they're playing, how well they know the matchup. But the dark type advantage typically gives you at least a little bit of an edge versus Gardevoir. And of course, like I said, Gholdengo being the most popular archetype, this having a good matchup into Gholdengo, that's a really good thing to have in this meta. Now on to number 4, we have Gardevoir, which actually won the whole event. And please remember, the rankings that we're using today are based off of the accumulation of points and placements at the World Championships. So Gardevoir did get 1st place in the Masters Division, piloted by Riley McKay. And what we're going to see here is that the 4 Monkey Dory and the 4 Dark Energy, I believe those to be vital in the deck at this point. You want to consistently be getting a dark attachment onto the Adrenabrains so that you can move as much damage as possible, either against decks that are damage spreading your board, or just moving your own damage that you accumulate with your Psychic Embraces. The tech here in Riley's list is the Fluttermane and the Devo, and possibly even the Bravery Charm, but really the Fluttermane and the Devo, looking at that as the tech in the deck, being helpful against Gholdengo. If you can get a board of, 3 Gholdengos ready to be Devoed and Devo them, well, that could be just a huge comeback for the deck. Of course, Gardevoir is so strong because Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace allows you to accelerate as many Psychic Energies as you want. You just have to put 2 damage counters on the Pokemon that you're accelerating them to. Like I said, that can actually be a positive. It's actually always a positive because Monkey Dory can move excess damage, and then of course our Screamtail actually wants damage on it. Screamtail being a very strong attacker that can snipe the bench or even just deal with the Pokemon that's in the active. We did also see another version of Gardevoir, this one being piloted by Kiana Meaney to a top 32, also being piloted by Henry Chow and Isaiah Bradner. This one is using the new Jellicent EX, and of course the new Frillish along with that from the new Black and White sets that were legal at Worlds. Frillish has the Oceanic Gloom that does 20 damage and item lock, and then Jellicent, of course, has the Oceanic Curse, the ability that says your opponent can't play item cards or tool cards. So trying to work this item and tool lock into Gardevoir's repertoire of things that it can do. Unfortunately, this was not the variant to go the farthest. Of course, like I said, Kiana Meaney capping out at top 32 there with the 18th place. He did tie his winning in on stream, so if you watch that stream match, both Kira and Farah and Kiana Meaney had a chance to make it into top cut, but they naturally tied on stream and both walked away with the top 32. Next at number 3, we actually have Raging Bolt, and Raging Bolt finished top 4 at the World Championships in the Masters division. Of course, it also did win the Juniors division, which is worth noting. Raging Bolt Ogerpon. We've got big damage with Raging Bolt. We've got the energy acceleration with Teal Mask Ogerpon, and also that can have some type coverage as well, being hitting and Zoroark for weakness, hitting Charizard EX for weakness. And then the support of the Hoot Hoot Noctowl, of course, Joel Seeker getting any two trainer cards from your deck, as long as you have a Tera Pokemon in play. Very, very strong effect. It's going to get you into games, and really, Raging Bolt against most decks only needs to have what it needs, like for 2 or 3 turns, and that's it. So just 1 or 2 Noctowls is usually enough to get you through the parts of the game where you need to search for specific cards, like the Professor Sada's Vitality to accelerate energy, maybe the Prime Catcher or the Energy Switch for doing some more things on top of your supporter for turn. Very strong deck with a lot of damage output, some type coverage, single prize options. It's not really a surprise that it got so far. It's just a deck that a lot of top players tend to not really gravitate towards. I think the higher performing players tend to like the stage 2 decks more, that give you a slower game with more options. Before we move on to the number 2 and number 1 decks, I did want to give 3 honorable mentions to decks that finished in the top 32 of the Masters division, but did not make it onto our top 10 list today. The first one we'll show is the Ho-Oh Armarouge box, which got top 32, actually specifically 32nd place. This is a toolbox deck, as you can see, with a lot of one-off Pokemon, about a dozen or so one-off Pokemon, trying to have an answer to just about anything. And the way you're going to build up these Pokemon is a combination of Ethan's Ho-Oh, which allows you to attach 2 fire energy from your hand to a benched Ethan's Pokemon, which is just going to be Ho-Oh itself. And then Armarouge, which allows you to move fire energy from your bench Pokemon to your active. And you're going to be using the new Prism energy, which is a rainbow as long as it's attached to a basic. And then you're also using Legacy energy, which is a rainbow and makes your Pokemon worth 1 less prize card when knocked out by damage. So you'll be using Pokemon like Wellspring Mask Ogerpon to try to knock out 2 smaller Pokemon at the same time. Lily's Clefairy EX to knock out Dragon-type Pokemon. Reshiram EX to hit for fire weakness. Iron Hands EX to knock out single prizers for 2 prizers instead. So yeah, using this toolbox of options for whatever is best at that time. Of course, when you have a toolbox deck, it's typically more susceptible to either drawing poorly or being disrupted by an Iono or something, or taking out the engine, like knocking out the Armarouge, and then you not being able to move energy around anymore. So it was able to get top 32 at the World Championships in the Masters division, so had to give it some showing for that. The next one I wanted to show was Tera Box, another toolbox deck, actually. 31st place, this one piloted by Alex Shemansky, and with some interesting stuff in this Tera Box. Typically, we're just focusing on basic Pokemon in here, like the Teal Mask Ogerpon, the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, Terapagos EX, Pikachu EX. Definitely want to note Pikachu EX real quick. The Resolute Heart ability says that it basically cannot be one-shot KO'd. It's going to remain with 10 HP, and it has the Topaz Bolt attack that does 300 damage. The interesting thing in here is the 1/1 line of Eevee and Leafeon EX. Leafeon EX is going to be able to hit Charizard EX and Zoroark EX, Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX, going to hit all of these for weakness, while also having the ability to actually use that Moss Agate attack, since you do have grass energy and water, and if you put a Terra Sparkling Crystal on this, you could also use that, and it heals 100 damage from each of your bench Pokemon. So against any sort of spread strategy, that's going to be really, really useful as well. And then the last honorable mention I had was Gholdengo Joltik. This is just a mixing of the Gholdengo variant of deck and the Joltik box variant of deck, and putting them 2 together to create one archetype. So you have the draw power and the burst damage of Gholdengo. You have the early aggression and early energy acceleration of Joltik combined with Iron Hands. And then you also have Pikachu EX as another attacker with that Resolute Heart ability, which can definitely slow the opponent down sometimes. This got top 16 in the Masters division, and it actually won the Seniors division. So this might be a deck that you want to know about and possibly try out for yourself. And then moving on to our number 2 deck, that's going to be Dragapult Dusknoir, which Justin Neudorf piloted to second place in the Masters division at the World Championships 2025. The list doesn't really have anything crazy going on. We're going to use, of course, our Dragapult line, the Dusclops and Dusknoir, because Curse Blast is so good. We've got Badoo for the item lock, and then our normal support Pokemon. This is using Hilda, which Hilda was a new supporter released in the black and white sets. So that was the new little bit of interesting card that Dragapult got from the new set. Other than that, they are playing 2 Jamming Tower. Jamming Tower actually helps against what Gholdengo got in this new set, which was Air Balloon. Jamming Tower can help against that. Counter Catcher up a Genesect, Jamming Tower, try to buy a turn that way. And the Dragapult Dusknoirs have just about all decided that Neo Upper Energy is the way to go for the A-Spec of this very, very strong archetype. And of course, the last deck we'll look at, number 1, is Gholdengo. The highest it finished in at the World Championships in the Masters division was top 8, piloted by Piper Lapine. However, I do think that Piper would have probably won, or would have been poised to win the whole thing, if her prizing wasn't so poor in the final game she played on stream in top 8. Now, Gholdengo EX is a very, very consistent, very strong archetype. It has the coin bonus ability. You can draw a card, but if it's in the active, you could draw 2, and you play a 4/4 line of these. So that's a lot of cards drawn every turn, especially if you could draw with 2 in the active, retreat, draw the next one in the active. Playing the baby Gholdengo, which Strike It Rich can do 120. Playing the new Genesect EX from the black and white sets. Genesect EX is such a huge boost to Gholdengo because now you don't need to play Ultra Balls. This list is playing 1 Ultra Ball, but you don't need to play them, and you don't need to play TM Evo anymore. Because Metallic Signal just searches your deck for 2 Evolution Metal Pokemon. So between Genesect EX and the Air Balloons, Gholdengo EX got such a huge buff in the functionality of the deck from the black and white sets. And then the interesting part, the most interesting part of Piper's list was that she's decided to play 1 Togepi, 1 Rare Candy, and 1 Togekiss. The Togekiss with the Wonder Kiss ability that says when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card. So that's going to help a lot when you're swinging into single prize Pokemon, or if you had a slower start, or if your opponent had a faster start. If you need to come back into the game or even out the prize trade, this is going to give you a coin flip to do that every time you take a knockout. And then we'll just look at Kieran Farah's 21st place Gholdengo list real quick. A little more straightforward. Of course, we're still going to be using the Genesect EX and the Air Balloon from the new set because those cards are now just absolute staples for the deck. But you'll see here that Kieran wasn't playing any prize card shenanigans, nothing to help him take extra prize cards. Like the Gholdengo Joltik box plays Iron Hands. Piper played the Togekiss. We saw John Ang on stream playing the Chansey that allows you to, if you take it from the prize cards, you can play it down, flip a coin. If heads, you take an extra prize card. None of that here from Kieran, and he was able to get really, really far with just a good old-fashioned, consistent, strong deck, placing 21st at the World Championships. So there's your top 10 for September 2025 as we go into the 2025-2026 competitive Pokemon TCG season. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.